could think of no better way to kick off season 3. I'm so privileged to have you here today. Erin Falconer, author, psychotherapist, and creator of Pick the Brain podcast, amongst many other multi-hyphenates. I feel like you do everything under the sun. And mother, of course. We have to do all the things.
Yeah, all the things.
I'm so happy you're here. I'm so happy you said yes.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. This is so fun. It's so great to reconnect after all these years.
I know, and it's funny because we're talking about friends. Actually, when I was reading the book, I was thinking about introducing you, and I was going to say, my friend, I'm like, are we? Because now that I know the terms, I have to really just tell you, because I just finished the book, I really, really enjoyed it.
Okay.
I think people need to know, obviously, it's not about breaking up with your friends.
Yes. It's this has been such a conundrum for me because you're right, absolutely. There's 10 chapters in this book and there's only one, as you know, on how to actually break up with your friends. There's 9 chapters on really the critical importance of fostering these female friendships in a really intentional way, and all of the benefits that come with that and how to do these relationships a lot better. But here's the rub. If I had titled it something like How to Be a Better Friend or, da-da-da-da, whatever, nobody's picking that book up.
Yeah.
So, because nobody...
Why? So, why? Why would people not pick up that book?
Well, that's the problem, because nobody is critically thinking about these relationships in the way that they are their family relationships or their romantic relationships or even the relationship with themselves, right? And that was kind of one of my epiphanies as I was starting to conceptualize this idea, was why do we just treat these relationships as the one category of relationships, which is kind of nice to have and something that should just keep giving, and yet every other kind of relationship, if asked, what's the secret to success in, with your romantic partner or whatever, it's like, oh, it's a lot of work. And we just don't have that mindset. And I was like, why is that? And so, as you mentioned off the top, I'm a therapist. And so I kind of looked at classical therapy models. And there's individual therapy, couples therapy, family therapy, nothing for dead zone. Right. And so what that meant to me is not necessarily that every friend couple needs to run out and get a therapist. Right. Although for like long-standing 20-year relationships that really are valuable, maybe not such a bad idea. But in general, what that means to me is that there's no kind of language out there in the zeitgeist that is kind of collectively agreed upon about how to navigate conflict in these relationships, what the blueprint for a good friendship looks like, how to get into a new one, out of an existing one. We just don't have language around this. And so every time we try to do something about it, it feels extra or over the top or like we're crossing a line, because that's just not what we do in friendship. So, we end up numbing ourselves to these relationships or else pushing things down and then having really big explosions on stuff that you're like, wait, why are you freaking out? And it's like, oh, right, that's like 10 years of me being frustrated and never voicing it, so.
It's so true. I was thinking about that all throughout the book. I was thinking to myself, it's so, when you have any other kind of issues and any other relationship dynamic, it's so expected, it's so normal to seek out professional help. But with friendships, it's like, well, you'll just figure
deal with it.
Deal with it.
Yeah, and one of the common threads is, like I interviewed I interviewed many women for the book, but 2 of them in particular had bad breakups back like in their early 20s, separate people that don't know each other, and they're still, to this day, like, I don't think they'd given a lot of conscious thought about it, but when I was interviewing them, it was like they both said, it's like I've just been pulled right back to that place and space of time with the hurt and the, like, wondering, like, what happened here? We never really, discussed this. And so, because the thing is you don't have really a right or a protocol to even grieve these relationships. Like, if you break up with a romantic partner, staying in bed for a week eating chocolate, totally acceptable.
Your friends take you out.
Your friends take you, come on, you're going to get over this. Shots are involved, people showing up with clean box and soup. But a friend, does something, just acts as you, and it's like, what are you supposed to do, right? And so, again, it just comes back to, like, we don't have processes in place to process any kind of nuances within these relationships.
Yeah. So that leads me perfectly to my first question. Was there a specific friendship that prompted this book?
Yes, there actually was. So I had written my first book, which is very, grounded in the female empowerment, female productivity space. And I was finished, with the tour of that, and for 6 or 7 months was like trying to come up with the follow-up, couldn't really come up with anything, went down a lot of kind of dead ends, and was getting really frustrated. As was my agent.
Yeah, of course.
And so for whatever reason, I just couldn't really come up with anything in that space. Nothing was sticking. And I remember very clearly waking up one morning at like 6 a.m., half awake, half asleep. I usually get up at like 7:38, so it's very early for me. And this phrase, how to break up with your friends, is just in my head. And I'm wake up and I'm kind of like half awake, half asleep. And I'm like, what? So I try to go back to sleep. I can't. Over the course of the next couple of days, it just kind of keeps resurfacing. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. Cut to, I'm waiting for a friend of mine who outwardly I would describe as like lifelong BFF.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and she's chronically late. So I'm there and I'm chronically on time.
You
or
talked
early.
about this so much in the book.
Yes.
I understand it the most.
Yes. And so I'm sitting there waiting and I'm getting really mad. And I'm really getting frustrated and I'm like, God, like probably talking to myself.
Yeah.
And I stop and I'm like, the degree that you are mad right now outsizes the crime, right? Like what's going on here? So because she's late, I've got time to still think about this. Right. And I'm like, why are you so mad? This is weird, right? And as I'm looking at kind of the landscape of our friendship, I realize that I've been frustrated for a long time. And I start to wonder, has she been frustrated too? And so again, it's like, instead of being the BFFs, which if anybody had said so-and-so, oh, I love her, she's like one of my best friends. I was like, actually, there's this huge chasm that's grown between us. And I couldn't believe it. But what I really was more surprised about was that this was the first time I was critically looking at this friendship or any friendship. And so I was like, whoa, this is wild. And so she ends up showing up. I'm actually then in a good mood because I've got like this, I'm like, whoa, I don't know that this is a book, but I'm like, I'm excited by my brain firing in different ways, right? So I get home and I'm like, well, I'm going to start to look at everybody in like my life, like what, and it was crazy. I had, there were the people that you write them down and I'm like, oh my God, I love, you just have this gut reaction, like, oh my God, this is,
they're
you just know, you just see a name like come, you're writing this down, and I'm like, yes, so much yes. And then I'd write down in, and I'd have like major frustration, or like, and my thoughts would be flooded with like, oh my God, da 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 da. And then the worst category though was the people that I'd write down and feel nothing at all.
Right.
And because at least when you're frustrated, you've got some energy with this relationship, and it doesn't mean it's going to work out entirely, but it's alive.
It's like if you're hate, you have to have love.
Exactly.
Like there's some energy there.
Exactly. Right. And so, anyways, that's also kind of the beginning of, this thought appears to me, how to break up with your friends, and then it just all starts to kind of make sense a couple days later. And actually, in the book, I end up kind of not in that moment, but like, as I'm writing the book, I sit down with her and confront her about this, just the lateness and how I've been feeling, and was it more than lateness? And, it was unbelievable because she started to bring up a lot of things too. And it was like,
was that unexpected? Like in your mind, was it like, were you thinking?
I was more like, I got to get this off my chest. And not really think, I thought it was going to be one way.
That's what I'm getting at.
Wasn't. I mean, I also am pretty well aware of like my own strengths and weaknesses, so I know that I show up 10 out of 10 with both of them. And so I it's not like I was like, what, when I am irritated, that you can basically tell, and I don't make a huge effort to like correct that. I think I am, but I know that everybody can read my energy. So it's not like it was so out of left field, but I wasn't really anticipating that in the monologue I had planned. It became a dialogue, that's
the whole
amazing.
Point. It's funny because one of my questions that I was going to ask you was, are you somebody who could really look at yourself? But as I was reading the book, I was like, damn, she's definitely somebody who can really look at herself. You had to have some like honest conversations with yourself.
Totally.
In writing this book.
Oh, totally.
Because you call yourself out a lot.
Totally. Well, one of the things I'm seeing all the time now, in the kind of pop culture, the zeitgeist, there's always these psychology terms that pop out, like boundaries, triggered, when,
Yeah.
like, and then just all of a sudden now everybody's saying them and stuff. And so for me, what I've been seeing a lot of, or what I had at the time, I'm still seeing it now, but is this idea of toxic, and she's toxic and he's toxic and they're toxic. And I absolutely hate this idea, because what it does is it allows you to just throw responsibility on somebody else and not do.
We get there.
Okay, we get there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're doing this. Right. So,
and we talked a little about this in the beginning, but I wonder if there's just a bit more in this. But like, it really caught me off guard that there is so little really, or I'm sure there's a little bit, but there's not really a ton on friendships.
Yeah.
And it made me kind of sad.
Yeah.
Because it's such a foundational core of everybody's existence is our friendship. And I'm curious about like that huge gap.
I don't know how to explain it, other than we've just kind of been conditioned to, like, kind of like I said, like it's a weird category of relationship where people just, I guess it's a function of over time. And I do think there's something to this being in the psychological language and understanding, like being able to carve out clear boundaries around, romantic stuff,
Right.
Like what you will and will not take. I'll never forget, I was being interviewed right at the beginning of the book, beginning of the book tour, about, from a woman who, Maria Menounos.
Yeah.
And stop me if I've said this before and it's boring. But
No. I only just discovered this friendship.
Right. And so she was interviewing me for the book, and she, right when it came out, and she was like, oh my God. It was right at the end of the interview. And she's like, oh my God, Erin, I need to ask you a question. She's like, I have this friend, and we've been friends forever, 10 years. And she's like, the last 7 or 8 times that we have made concrete plans, like date, place, time, like it's locked in. Either the night before or the morning of, she'll send me a text canceling and being like, da 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 da. And she holds up her phone. She goes, look, I'm not making this up. I'm not exaggerating. What do I do with this friend?
I would cancel that friend.
So that's what I said. I said, Maria, I've got news for you. You're not in a friendship with this person.
Yeah.
You're in some kind of weird relationship, but this is not a friendship. This person is not committed to you. I said, let's look at this another way. If this was a guy you had started dating, what? She was like, over the second time, it's done, finished.
Right.
And I'd contemplated on the first time, second time done. I said, exactly. Because you've got clear boundaries, clear expectations about what you will. I said, how many times are you going to let this person cancel on you?
Yeah.
She's like, oh, I don't know. And that's the thing, because we're not thinking about it.
Yeah.
Right. So to answer your question, I'm not sure why. I just think it's not that sexy yet.
Yeah.
But it should be, because, as I talked about, right, I think it's in the first or second chapter, the scientific evidence about how important these relationships are psychologically, emotionally, physically.
Oh my God.
Like literally can extend your life by years by having strong, committed, intentional friendships. And so these are not just nice to have things.
Right.
They're
integral.
Really, they're integral to living well.
Yeah. And in the end, you also add like that whole, without our friendships, we're putting too much pressure on the other relationships in our life, which causes like a major deterioration.
Totally.
You've got to have the friendship.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Esther Perel talks about this all the time, who's a kind of famous couples therapist.
Yeah.
And she says, which I absolutely love, that today's couples, more and more romantic couples, more and more have become, the other's everything, right? And nobody can be your everything except you. You're the only person that can be your everything, right?
Yeah.
So,
and certainly not men are not as good at us at being everything either.
Exactly. And
Right.
so, if you look at like relationships from 40 years ago, and there's many flaws about that model as well.
Right.
But there was kind of a separation of church and state. One person did one thing, the other person did the other thing. And when they came together, it was more talking about what's going on between them. Now we know everybody's coworker by name, the gripes they have with everybody.
so
We're not
true.
just talking about working out. We're doing yoga together. The child rearing is so enmeshed. Everybody's got to have the same opinion. And so that takes the romance and the mystery and the spark out of everything, right? When you're so enmeshed in like knowing every facet of this other person. And so that also is another superpower of friendship, being able to kind of look at your needs, look at the needs of the, what you're giving to the romantic relationship and expecting and then say, okay, now where are the holes? Where can I offload some of, the comedy person or the mentor person or the workout person, and like start diversifying your portfolio for the real health and wellness of your romantic relationship.
I love that. That was a new concept that I guess we all have, like, our different kind of friends, but being able to see it written out in the different genres was very interesting to me because
Yeah.
I suddenly started to look at, oh, I do use that person as my mentor. I do use that friend as, like, the
Yeah.
cheerleader. Like, I'd never it's just part of the whole talking
Yeah.
about the space. Like, we're doing it, but we're not I wasn't so aware of it.
Yeah. And I think being aware, like the awareness piece is the biggest part.
Right.
Being aware, crystallizing, the role or roles of that relationship in your
Right.
life really helps you be intentional about the energy you're putting and when in those relationships, right? And when you show up, you kind of know what you're there for, and therefore you can get more of that out of it,
Yeah.
right? And also deliver. It's also about the reciprocal. What are
Yeah.
you delivering? What are you showing up with?
Right. Um, I might know the answer to this, I
Yeah.
might not. What do you think is the greatest threat to friendship today? And why is it social media? No, I'm kidding.
Well, I do think social media plays obviously a huge role
Yeah.
in creating, number one, a facade of real connection. I think social media friends and alliances can be great as long as you're viewing them with a very critical lens and
Yep.
knowing exactly what the
Yep.
role they play.
Yep.
But I think what really does a disservice to friendship is this idea of kind of FOMO, and you see other people doing things and it feels like you're not invited, and you've got no idea what the backstory is on this or how this all happened. You've got no, we're always creating narratives in our head that have
Yep.
honestly so often nothing to do with the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
And we all know, I mean, it's been said 1,000 times, like all of these pictures on social media, oh, like BFFs and whatever, they probably like,
Yeah.
they were not even having fun half the time.
Yeah.
That you got that one good picture
Yeah.
and you put it up there. And so there's just a lot of, emptiness, vapidness.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of stuff built on anything. And because we're not used to asking the questions and being upfront, like if you see a group of your friends out and you weren't invited, instead of going into a rage cycle and then like deep diving on their stories to see, well, where did they go?
Yeah.
What did they do?
Because we're all doing that.
Because we're all doing that.
Yeah.
Can we start practicing building the muscles of self-advocating and say, hey, you guys all went. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I wish I could have been there.
Yeah.
Saying, hey, just being open about the way you feel, start these lines of communication. And if it feels like just too much heavy lifting to do that, you've either got to look in on yourself and say, why am I so afraid to self-actualize and self-advocate? Number one, or is this just not the relationship for me? Do I not have the energy because I actually don't really care?
Yeah.
And so a lot of this whole process, even though counterintuitively, even though it's about relationships, is about the self and how you feel your relationship to yourself, being honest with yourself. It's another thing, boundaries, in pop culture, everybody's
my
talking
God,
about
yeah.
boundaries, which are super important. But the thing is, we don't do the work to really know what our boundaries are.
Right.
And so we're only being reactive when something's crossed that we have not, it doesn't feel good, but we've never communicated it.
Right.
So unless you're going to take the time and effort to really be like, these are my non-negotiables, these are my must-haves, these are my da-da-da-da-da, and then be really clear on communicating these, it's on you.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, sure, there's a certain level of decorum. You don't, the way you talk can be disrespectful and like there's the obvious things, but then there's like the friend showing up late. Well, she did it for 10 years and I never really said anything. I was passive aggressively, low key, like irritated for the first 15 minutes of every time we would hang out. And I'm like, well, she's obviously getting that, but this is on me.
Yeah.
I got a problem with it. Say it.
Yeah. I was so bummed out when I realized that it wasn't going to be about breaking up with friends and it was going to be a lot about self because I was like, oh shit. Like I really wanted to just be able to like, yes, how am I going to, because I actually have a thing about this topic was for me personally very appropriate because I have a thing about like, I cut out a lot of friends.
Yeah.
But I actually now realize like I have a lot of work to do because I really made it a lot about them. And or if it was even about them, I did the ghosting thing or I didn't speak up, but we're gonna get there. It's one of the major things that I got to was And my boyfriend's always telling me when I introduce him to people, he's like, "Is that your friend? Like, because
Yeah.
are they on Instagram? Did you ever meet them?" I'm like, "No, but we're friends through Instagram." He's like, "But you never spent any time with them, so they're not a friend." I'm like, "But they're really a friend. We spend so much time DMing." He's like, "But that's not a friend."
Right.
And we used to get in these big arguments about it. And when I finished the book, I put it down, I texted him, I'm like, "Okay, so as it turns out, none of these people are friends. They're just really like, they're DM pen pals, and that's
Yeah.
okay. It
Yeah,
could be
that's
that in the future
okay.
they will be."
Yeah, that's
But
okay. Oh, I just thought of something, bringing it back to your question
yeah,
about why is there such a void in this market? I think one of the silver linings of the pandemic is that this has become front and center. So I came up with this whole book proposal and I sold this idea February 17th, 2020.
oh my God.
3 weeks later, we are in national lockdown, quarantine. I thought it was a great idea then. I could never predicted, how this would explode when we're all of a sudden running into our micro bubbles, our friends as we know it are cut off. And so there
Yeah.
were, as I talk about in the book, the beginning of the Zoom happy hour season where people
Yeah.
are like,
That was the whole thing.
and my reaction to that was like, I'd get some Zoom happy hours. I was just like, why would I ever do that? That sounds so stupid. And then I'd receive some, from a dear friend. I'd be like, oh my God, yes, I haven't seen you. Please. Yes, let's do this. And I was like, this information is around us all the time. We're just never paying attention. And so this is really the pandemic has really shone a spotlight on this. And so I'm hoping that this chasm starts to, this void starts to fill up with a million different titles on this topic.
Yeah, I definitely think we all had to really evaluate our friendships in
Yeah.
a way that we never had before, because quite literally we had to even make choices like, who are we bringing in
a life and death situation.
When you have like a very small
Right.
little window,
Yeah.
you can just bring everybody in. You have to
No.
like make some real choices,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is like, when else really in history did we ever have to do that?
Never.
Right, not in our lifetime. Maybe like in the Spanish flu. So I want to talk a little bit about self-distancing, and maybe you could talk about what that is.
Yeah, totally. So, the thing about this book is it's not about going through your contact list with a machete, right? I mean, certainly if you've done a complete audit of the people in your life in a kind of rigorous way, and this is the first time you're doing it, there probably is a relationship or two that is no longer serving you, and you might want to do something about that. In other words, get rid of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But the most important thing here is really kind of creating a hierarchy of the people in your world and who's that starting lineup, and then who are the people that are kind of, middle circle friends and then acquaintances, and really just understanding that landscape. It's not about, axing people. It's about really being clear on where you're going to put your energy. And so as long as you're like, okay, I'm not ready to like cut this person out of my life.
Right.
But there's just not enough energy in the relationship. It's not dynamic enough right now for them to be on my starting lineup. It's just about making an energy shift. That, again, it's the awareness piece is so important to this, right? And so when you can kind of see it laid out to you in front of you, like these are my 10 go-tos or 8 or 5, whatever, 5 to 10 go-tos, and understanding this is where I'm going to spend 80% of my energy, then all of a sudden things start to realign. They start to reshuffle themselves. Now, if somebody has been on that starting lineup, that starting bench for 20 years, and all of a sudden you're, not showing up in the same way, and they notice, a lot of times there's a natural flow to things where
Right.
if you're not 100% in this relationship in the way you were, oftentimes they are also not. And so if this kind of can just shift and go with the flow without any conflict, there's nothing really to do there other than the awareness piece. If you have an energy shift around this and that person is noticing or not noticing and keeps kind of engaging you in the same way as like the starting lineup, where they're constantly trying to make plans, constantly texting, that's not working, and that doesn't work for you anymore, that's when you're going to have to probably have a conversation. And it's just about explaining, from a bandwidth perspective, you want to honor the relationship you guys have had. What happens is we end up staying in these relationships so much longer than we should often. And instead of the defining kind of memory and moments around that relationship being all of the fundamental years you spent together, all of the things, becoming your own people together and all of that stuff, which are so amazing. Instead of that being the defining, storyboard of this friendship, cut to 5 years after the expire date, and now what is the defining kind of emotion around this relationship is irritation, frustration, guilt, resentment, da 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 da. So we've taken something that otherwise could be still such a powerful thing, even if you're not, showing up with them all the time. And we're showing up with them, but it's not in a good way.
Right.
And so that starts to become and that's when we look at kind of from an energy, like why we feel so depleted. Yeah. You just look at like one little case study of this and you've got like a tab open, in your thing. And that's just one. Now imagine if you're doing that with 5 or 6 people.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you've got to choose yourself. Again, it's a relational thing, but you've got to choose yourself and what feels right, but you can only do that if you're paying attention.
Right. And if you're willing to get close to yourself, which is quite literally.
Right.
What are some ways that people can get closer to themselves in order to do this exercise?
Yeah. So for me, one of the biggest things, I talk about this in both books, is like we just live in a real time of chaos. Emotional chaos, especially the social media of it all. It's just going. Everything is very loud. And of course, you throw in a global pandemic in the middle of this, it's just like the gloves are off, right? Politics, the whole, exactly. And so what I think is not just, nice to do, it is incumbent upon every single person who is serious about having any kind of fulfillment or ability to contribute in the society, is finding 15 to 20 minutes a day, every day, where you can turn the volume down to 0 on the chaos. And so for me, that's meditation. That's not for everybody. But as I like to say, you have to find your hot shower, right? You have to find, and why I say that is because when we met, when I was back in my internet startup days, time and time again, somebody would run into my office and be like, oh my God, Erin, I had the best idea. Can I tell you it? They'd sit down or they'd be at the conference table. Oh, I had this great idea. And they'd say the idea and either I'd say or somebody at the conference table would go, that's amazing. How did you think of that? And I can't tell you how many times the answer was, I didn't know. I was just in the shower and it came to me. Yeah. And why is that, right? Because it's for, 90% of people living in this country, it is the only 2 minutes, 90 seconds to 2 minutes, where they're not fully awake yet. They've got hot water hitting their face. They're massaging their head, like shampooing. They're not thinking about anything.
Right.
And what happens? An idea comes up, right? And so all of the answers are within us. We just can't hear them.
Yeah.
And it is a big leap of faith because the busier we are and the more overscheduled we are, for me, what that means is the more scared we are to just sit with ourselves, right? And the longer we've done it, the harder it is to just kind of break free.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying you have to go into a transcendental meditation zone, right?
But you're not saying that
but I'm not saying that. It's a worthy goal. No, but there are so many apps that it's 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Just start with 5 minutes. Sit on your bathroom floor. If you've got kids that are crazy, sit on your bathroom floor, lock the door. It's 5, have the shower running. Oh, that's bad for the drought. But you know what I mean? Something.
Yeah.
And listen to something for 5 minutes and just start to make that a practice. Or maybe just having a bath every night without a device, where you're really just sitting there, calm down, trying to unwind, get that volume down to 0. That is the first place you have to start. And there's no way around that, as far as I'm concerned. And nobody else can do that for you.
No,
not possible. So there's that. And then there's just the I have exercises in the book. The first thing is just take a piece of paper and a pen or a computer. I like the tactile.
Me too. I like
pen and paper of it, but whatever you do, and just literally write down the people that are in your life, friends, and just watch the way you feel saying their name.
Yeah.
This is a great, right?
God, that's so interesting. It sounds like so simple, but there is an immediate visceral reaction that happens.
Totally. And and just to take it into like a real life example of why I know this works is just imagine your cell phone rings. You pick up the phone, you look at the name on the call display and immediately go, right? Or else you go, oh my God. And you, right? In great information.
God.
Right? And so this is the same thing. It's just like, so do that. Start carving out 5 minutes, then 10 minutes, then 20 minutes. Got to be every day. It can be a device-free walk. but not on a busy street. You know, it's got to
Right.
be like, it's
Yeah.
got to be, the volume's got to be 0. So anywhere where the volume literally or metaphorically is high, that's not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
And you've got this list written in front of you. This stuff will start to percolate. Answers will start to come up. It's not going to
So
happen
true.
tomorrow, but it will come.
I love that. I love the 100% responsibility, 100% freedom.
Yes.
God, that really resonated with me.
Yeah.
Again, back to the fact that like I was just so excited to break up with friends. I was like, oh great, I'm going to become an expert at it
Right.
because I do it enough. But like this whole concept about like really kind of like who you're being in the friendships. Because
Absolutely.
we want to really just be like,
It's all you.
You were showing up late, you know?
Right. And that's no good, right? Because to the point of that quote, with 100% responsibility comes 100% freedom. And once you are free, you are powerful, right? That's when you step into your personal power. And so back to this idea of calling everybody toxic, you're giving away the responsibility. And there's so much information and so many good learnings about why this relationship didn't work because of your own role in it. And that's not victim shaming. Sometimes there are people that are just have lost the plot and acting really badly, but those are outlier situations.
Right.
Most times when you're in a bad relationship with somebody, they have perfectly fine relationships with other people, right?
So true.
And so it's like, what in me is allowing this behavior, first of all? Because I've obviously allowed it. And you teach people how to you teach people how to treat you, right? So there hasn't been a firm enough boundary there, right? You've allowed something to happen repeatedly. And I talk about this in the example with the friend that I let rent my back house.
Oh my God.
And it was just an explosion. And and she was one of those people that like, she always has something going on in her life. Like her dog has a huge vet bill, her apartment's on fire. Like
We all have those.
And so I would be the go-to person that she would call. And like, it would be like, 5-alarm fire every time she called. And then I would be like problem solving this and like, outsourcing to my network to try and fit, you know what I mean?
Right.
And then I'd call her the next day or text her to check in, I'd help resolve it. And I'd call her to check in and she'd be like, I'd be like, how are you? And she'd be like, oh, like good, just doing da-da-da. And I'd be like, no, I mean like with the thing, like, how are you feeling? You know, da-da-da-da. And she's like, oh, good. Meanwhile, I've been and I've been up in a like sweat, like trying to like, my mind is like on overdrive. So this went on and on and on until it like hit a very big crescendo, which I talk about in the book. And then I was like, she's done. This is over. Get out of my guest house. You're out of here. It ended in a big fan of flames. And I was like, God, she's crazy.
Right.
Phew, so glad to be done with her. And it was only in the process of writing this book, researching this book, I was like, God, what a missed opportunity. Because what in me needed this?
Yeah.
I obviously had, a fragile ego or something and needed this God complex, like I am the all powerful, I can solve this for you. Nobody else can do what I can do. Look, she's coming to me. Yeah. And so because of that, if I had been able to look at that then, I probably would have been able to do some really great work and say, why am I feeling so fragile? Or why am I feeling so egotistical that I feel like I can... Why would I ever want to take this on? It's like kind of like, who would ever want to be the president of the United States? We got to look clinically at this person. Right. Like, why would you ever want to take this on?
So true.
So, yeah. So
I
there's
love that.
Yeah.
Something that I think a lot of people struggle with is this ability to kind of observe imbalances in relationships. We've all either been on like the giving or the receiving end of that. It's a tough one.
You mean like where you feel like you're showing up more for somebody? Like, give me an example.
Yes. Either I think even within close friends, I think sometimes you end up in these situations where it takes you a bit to maybe realize, or maybe not your close friends. I think often with that, you're pretty aware if there's an imbalance, but realizing there's an imbalance later, like I think this ability to really observe, is the person as invested as me in the friendship?
Right.
Like I'm interested in that whole thing.
Oh yeah, that's really important because and I talk about that in the book, the idea of expectation and understanding what the expectation, being kind of clear from
Right.
both parties. And you don't necessarily have to have like conversations about this. It's
Right.
just about observing it. And it's like, do I have as much skin in the game here as the other person, or vice versa?
Right.
Because
Well, and I think this is where this is where it becomes so tricky with relationships and friendships.
Yeah.
Because in relationships, you're like, are we dating or are we not?
Right, right.
But what about in a friendship? It's so much harder.
Right. Yeah, no, it is, because it is a less defined space, obviously.
Yeah.
But all you can really go on is what is happening real time, and what you're willing to put into it, and what you need from it. And
Right.
if that's not, if that equation doesn't balance, you got to make some choices. You can either talk to the person and say, hey, I feel like you're not showing up. Has anything changed? Is anything going on? By the way, we're often so afraid to have these conversations because we think it's going to be a referendum on us. Like, I'm not calling you because I'm pissed because of X, Y, and Z. I can't tell you how many times like as a therapist, when people come in and they're talking about their friendships, and I'm like, but you just made that up.
Right.
She's never said that to you. Why are you saying that? Well, here, look at this text here. She said this. I know her. I know she's saying this, but she means it. You don't.
Right.
And so often that the other person has something completely unrelated to you going on, stressed about a mom who's sick, or a career move, or unhappy because they can't get pregnant, or unhappy because they just got pregnant, or you know what I mean?
Right,
And
right.
and you don't have the relationship with them to necessarily talk about all of those things.
Right.
Or maybe you do, and they just don't want, they're dealing with themselves. And
Yeah.
so first of all, starting to say, hey, is anything going on with you, just generally, not about,
Right.
I just feel there's been a distance. I want to make sure you're okay, is like a great place to start, especially if you've had any sort of long-standing relationship with this person, right?
And softer and much less
Much
vulnerable.
softer and much less about you. And then if they're like, no, I'm fine, everything's good, then you can say, okay, well then maybe it feels like personal. Is there something going on between the two of us? Because I feel like I'm showing up, and I'm not sure that you feel the same way.
Yeah.
And so I just want to get clear on it. So
Even just hearing you say that makes me like schwitz a little bit.
I know, because we're not used to doing it.
It's a hard thing to
We're not
ask
used to
somebody,
doing
like,
it.
where it is in a friendship, like, are we feeling this? And also because, there's also this thing with women. It's like, am I like a very, very, are we best friend? And I hate
Right.
best friends.
No,
I
no.
don't even like that word
Right,
anymore, right? But
right.
one of your, like,
Yeah,
but
yeah, when it's
'cause we have-
closest friends, yeah.
Like, it's hard to ask another woman
I know.
where I stand in your.
I know, and it's only because we haven't practiced it.
Yeah.
Because we have largely no problem saying this, like, with a romantic partner.
Right.
What's going on here?
Yeah,
What's the
don't
status?
bring it off the pot.
Yeah.
Are we dating? Are we
Are
a
we
thing?
dating? Are you
Right.
seeing other people? Are we exclusive? Are we,
Yeah.
and then it's like, well, what's your views on marriage? Then the 2.0 and then the 3.0, blah, blah, blah. But this is all kind of like chartered out for us. This course,
God.
and it doesn't mean those conversations are easy to have, but we have them, because not having them gets you in a whole heap of trouble.
Right.
And there's too much gray.
Yeah.
You need some black and white about what, where people stand. And so, it's just about starting these conversations, and
And it might suck.
but you know what? And it's only going to get better.
Yeah.
The
It's
more
really true. That's
do
really
this.
true. God, it's such a scary thought.
And you know what's actually interesting? So that I have the quiz
Yeah.
at the, I don't know, it's like chapter 9, maybe, or 8, maybe 8. I did this with my best friend.
I'm scared too, but I know I need to.
Well, the good thing is doing it with somebody that you're not in a fragmented relationship with.
No, you have to be solid.
Was really unbelievable. We were having no problems.
Right.
I love her. So obsessed. Best friend. And when we did it, like, it was, and I was so nervous. And she was kind of nervous. She was like,
But why? Like, why were you nervous if you have no friction with this friend?
well, I was just like, oh God, this is so awkward.
Right.
Because it's like, when would I, like, why are we even talking? It's like weird. But I definitely didn't want to do it with somebody I was having friction with.
No.
Because it's like, that can be kind of explosive.
Yeah.
So we did it, and it was unbelievable. Like, one of the questions is, when was the last time I irritated you and you didn't say anything? Why didn't you say anything?
Right.
And it's just like, that opened a whole thing. And I was like, oh my God, I can't even believe we're talking about this.
Right.
But it's so amazing.
Yeah.
It was like, again, because we're not super defensive. Well, we're not defensive at all, but we're not in a defended state. It's like, so it's good to practice with somebody that you're really feeling warm about. And also, you get great information.
Yeah.
Like, it's,
Yeah.
just don't do it drinking.
No, I know you were like,
you drink
do
after
it and then go drink.
Yeah, don't. This is not a drinking game.
No.
You can have a drink after, because then you can get
you want to be of like sound mind.
you
like
don't want to be overly
emotional.
Yeah, that could backfire.
You talk in the book about relationships kind of needing friction, growing from friction. I think this is so important because like we're so trained, and it's like in our nature to avoid it at all costs.
Yeah.
But there's so much growth there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if any two people of any substance have had a relationship over any amount of time, there is going to be friction.
Yeah.
Such is life. It's a shit show a lot of times, right? And how people handle, large cultural shifts, cultural moments, or just personal, big personal moments is going to bring out friction, right? And then how you communicate that and how you show up for each other. And you don't even need actually any big moments. Sometimes we just irritate each other. Sometimes you show up with a friend and you're in a bad mood, and you either irritate them or they irritate you. And that's friction. And there's got to be a certain amount of understanding about those little moments, but we don't want to just be skating over them, right? And it's not about a frictionless existence. In fact, in therapy, there's a thing called rupture and repair.
That's right.
Which is one of the most therapeutic things that can happen with a relationship and a therapist, is if the therapist lets the client or patient down, or says something that feels really off, or ends up showing up late constantly for sessions, or does something that feels like it's violating that kind of container. The ability for the client or patient to stand up and say, you really upset me, you really hurt me, I'm really pissed at you, you did this and it didn't feel good, I don't trust you, to bring whatever is, whatever's come up for them. The ability to say that and allow the opportunity for the therapist to take it in, own it, and then metabolize it into the relationship to come out on the other side with a deeper understanding of each other, is like, this is what you strive for, right? This is because on the other side of that is
where the magic
happens. It's way deeper connection, way deeper sense of trust and being seen and heard. And so we always give these moments up in friendship, right? We're just like making excuses.
Yeah,
like,
you make excuses.
Oh, she's a single mom. She's da 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 da. She's
going through something.
She's going through something. Da, da, and constantly just putting the relationship, the strength of the relationship, over to the side to make excuses and to minimize the way you're feeling in this. What you're doing is minimizing the other person. Allow them the opportunity to stand up and own it, right? Because that's where the power lies.
Yeah.
And you asked me actually a little bit earlier, what's the biggest thing, the threat to friendship? So certainly social media, but I think it's other women, because I think we don't know how to self-advocate for ourselves. And so we end up distancing or judging or projecting so violently onto other women that when I look at collectively as a society where we are, and I'm like, how are we still making 83 cents on the dollar? It hasn't changed since 1977.
Yeah.
If this were a man problem, this would be solved. We'd all unify, right? But we don't know how to do it on a micro level, and therefore we can't take it out. Energetically, we just can't take this out into the world, because if we could get it right here, we'd be able to first of all, model it for other people, other women, and then be able energetically to take it out. We can't do that. It's too much fragmentation, too much conflict that we're not dealing with woman to woman.
Yeah.
So we gotta just start owning this space and owning the relationships between us. Doesn't mean you have to love you and be the biggest fan of everybody, but I think you owe them the respect of being honest and showing up for yourself within these relationships. Otherwise, we're gonna be making 83 cents on the dollar to 2050.
Yeah.
The earth will have melted and we'll still be like,
we'll be floating on a cheaper iceberg.
Yeah, exactly.
Smaller iceberg.
Smaller iceberg. They're like, how did we get here?
Yeah, it's really true. And I know this to be true because I'm somebody who's like kind of, I'm like what I would consider like a more fully expressed woman. And I even have such a hard time saying things that are bothering me to my friends, to female friends. And it's so interesting.
Yeah, well, and I noticed that because I have a bunch of really good guy friends. Not a problem. When
know,
I
you
get
talk
irritated,
about
when
that.
I get irritated with them, I don't even think about it. It's like, that was so uncool. Why did you just do that? You know,
Yeah.
we had plans. You did it. Like, it's not.
And they're
I'm
like, my
not.
bad.
Yeah, and they literally like, oh, sorry, dude.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Or else if they do take a stand, it's not like emotional. It's just like, we're just trading.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing else on the story. There's
Yeah.
no other thing to the narrative other than what's going on, like trading facts. You know
So
what I mean?
true.
And so that's why they don't get wrinkles, because they're able to compartmentalize, just say what they mean.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah, and they're willing to walk away, like fight it out
Yeah.
if they disagree. I'm not saying that's right, but like, and then they're on, and then
Yeah.
they've left that there.
That was one of the things I wanted, like you talk about the boys being in their bodies, the
Yes,
physical
the
bodies.
physical
It's the exact
bodies,
thing.
and we're in our heads.
Yeah. Women are just, the way that they confront any sort of confrontation is so, men just like, they kind of duke it out.
Yeah. You know, from a very young age, guys are just kind of thrown on a sports field and say, kick this ball around. And it's all there. The way they communicate is physical. That doesn't happen with us.
No.
You know, and so we're taught from a very young age to kind of be in our heads. And you want to always be in the body.
Yeah.
Always. That's the
Yeah.
goal. And so that idea of turning down the chaos is really about listening to your body, feeling your body, whether it's meditation or you're walking or take a bath. The act of just kind of deep breathing and concentrating on that is like unifying body and mind. And that's the sweet spot. That's where you want to be. But women are so, you know what I mean? How many girlfriends do you have that are terrible sleepers? It's because they go to bed and it's just like,
well, like all of us.
and every guy is like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they're in their body.
Yeah. It's so true. An area that I realized that I really actually need to be better at and really stood out for me is, you talk about this cultivating a diverse group of friends. I can honestly call myself out and say I sorely lack in this area, but I actually think we become better humans, better friends, better people on the planet by having friends that aren't like us, but we're so like, we go back to the well.
Exactly, because again, we're scared to confront ourselves in any way. And so having an echo chamber of people that think like us, have the same life experience, it's very validating, right? You're just all confirming the same thoughts and ideas, and which is self-validating. And when we think like, oh, maybe I'm gonna be curious about, you know, people that have really different circumstances from me, you have to show up in a way that you are not comfortable doing because you haven't done it in so long. And so it's super important to have people that come from the same world as you, because that's how you feel understood. You can finish each other's sentences.
Yeah.
You know, you really have like almost like a felt sense of what the other's been through. And yet friendships have the ability to bring out such a different part of you, different parts of yourself, right? And if you are just locked into one type of person, you're also only discovering that one part of yourself.
Yeah.
So the more dynamic your friend group is, the more dynamic of a person you can become. So if you're remotely interested in self-growth, this is like a key step towards that, right? And so you want to look at people that have, you know, a different cultural upbringing, different religious upbringing, different parts of the world, different educational experience, different age, right? Like, and that doesn't mean that you go around being like, I need a black friend. That's not what this is. It's not a token thing. It's
Nobody
again,
wants
it's
to
about
be that for you.
Exactly, and that will be totally counterproductive. But it's about really, again, the awareness, and having a genuine curiosity, right? Just like, I wonder what is out there. I wonder what these different experiences, like how I could show up for them and they could show up for me. And all of a sudden the world starts putting different people in front of you. Like it's magnetic, right?
Yeah.
So again, it's not like, let me go
to
an LGBTQ thing because I need a queer friend.
Right.
It's about just kind of opening yourself up energetically, and the world will provide that for you in a natural, real way. It's about having curiosity, and then you just want to open up the aperture on the people in your life.
I really love that. I had never really thought about that before. And you touch upon it in actually so many different ways, because you touch upon it in the quite literal sense where you say diversify your friends,
Yeah.
but you also talk about the many different kinds of friends.
Yeah.
And when you start to be honest about the different roles that friends play,
Yeah.
you actually realize how much you need to diversify.
Right. You can't have like, so I'm a very big introvert, right? And nobody believes that about me, but it's true.
I actually, so when I first met you, I thought you didn't like me.
Oh yeah, I get that a lot.
Like, I was like, oh, she hates me, it's me. But
no.
I read the book, I was like, oh, it wasn't me.
No. I'm just extremely introverted.
Yeah.
And like nobody understands it about me because I'm always doing talks and like
Yeah.
but it takes all of I love doing them, but then I get home and I'm like
Yeah.
a soggy noodle because it's used every ounce of my energy to like show up.
Yeah.
In that way. And so, but what's really important for me, and I know this about myself, is I cannot just have other friends that are introverted or I would never go out, right? And so I have one or two friends that are constantly knocking down my door saying, you know, with invitations, do this or do that. And we've had to have conversations in the past where I say, listen, it's not personal. Keep inviting me. I will say yes.
Right.
I'm just not going to say yes to 90% of the time. And if you're okay with that, then keep inviting me. And they do. And then I end up going and I dread it. Like the morning of, I'm like,
I could so see
I'm like,
that.
oh my God, why did I make these plans? And then I go out and time and again, I'm at the end of the night, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so happy I did this. Because they've pulled me into, they've unlocked a part of me that would otherwise lay dormant. Now, I can't have every one of my friends extroverted. I die a slow, painful death.
Yeah,
like I
you
can't,
would.
there's
You
no way.
literally would.
I will do that. So again, like just paying attention, like who are the people in my life? I can't have the people, I don't need 4 mentors.
Right. No.
Right?
Well, you are the mentor. I found that out. So you certainly can't have 4.
Right. No, exactly. So, I mean, but and only you can do that work and figure out who's there, what do you need, and then what do you need more of, what do you need less of, but it can't all be the same.
Yeah. So there's like 2 last things I want to do before we wrap, because I think we're getting told. But I want to actually talk about the breaking up with friends. I often get accused, like I'm a chronic friend breaker upper, which of course now means I have to do some work for myself. But I am also like such a big believer. Like energy is such a finite resource.
Yeah.
I'm like a big fan of like, let it go back out in the universe. Like, let it go. I think in many ways, like we hold on to things for so long.
Totally.
Like, can we talk about like really just like letting the thing go?
Letting the thing go. Yeah, exactly. You have to let go of what doesn't serve you, because if you're holding on to that, you don't have enough space for something that shows up that does serve you, but you don't have capacity for. And so we have to look at it like that. It's kind of arbitrage, right? An energy arbitrage. It's like, have the awareness piece, figure out what doesn't feel good, and then make some choices. And the way you kind of explain that to yourself is, I need to let this go so I can make space for what inevitably will show up and will serve me. But if I hold on to this, I'll miss time and time again those opportunities. The right person is going to go floating right by because it's just a bandwidth issue, right? And so we really have to think about, you know, and it's tough, and and especially if these are long-standing relationships. You know, there's no easy way to have this conversation. But ghosting a person that's been friends with you for 10 years, bad look.
Oh my God.
Not healthy for you, again, because it's leaving a tab open for you. You have to close that tab, right? And it definitely is leaving a tab open for the person that you've ghosted, right? So again, it's just about that energy protection, and you've got to be saying to yourself, I've got to choose me. I've got to choose me. And it's not over the other person.
Right.
It's just when you're not saying things that you mean or feel, you're not choosing yourself. Right. And that does a real number on you from a self-esteem perspective, from an energy perspective. So you've got to constantly be waking up saying, I'm choosing myself today. And what does that look like today? Well, I'm going to have a tough conversation. Right. And the thing about it is, when you do it in this way, it's not reactive. So often we have these like a big blowout and then it's like, you're done. Right. That's just a reaction. When you're reacting, you're losing. Right. You've got zero personal power when you're reacting. So when you're making choices proactively, you're really living in your power. And as hard as it feels to have these conversations or to make these decisions, it's still the choice of personal power. It's the empowered choice. And that's where that's what you need to have as your default setting. And once we get used to doing that, it's less and less difficult.
What about if it's like not a long-standing relationship? What if it, like, because I had, with this era of social media and like I have and probably you too, we're exposed to a lot of people. And so like we have more. Back when we were young, you didn't have like hundreds of people filtering in. You had the people you grew up with.
Yeah,
By the way, I was
exactly.
so envious of your lake life. Oh my God, like it's such a beautiful thing that you had. Like, but we all had like this. Now we are exposed to people. So I feel like in some ways I'm like, oh, I'm such a jerk. I have to let all these people go. But there's also more people coming than I ever even invited. So it's like, does everyone need a conversation?
No, definitely not. If you don't have a long-standing relationship with the person, if it's like been a year or something, you can let the natural energy of that just kind of, you can go with the energy. Again, unless that other person is just like not.
They think they're your best friend.
Yeah, they think you're best friend. Then you're just going to want to have a conversation with them to free yourself, right? And it's not, it doesn't have to be a long conversation. It's just like, hey, listen, I feel like I'm letting you down. You keep asking me to do things that I just don't have the bandwidth. And so I just want to be clear, like, I can't show up in the way that I think that you feel like you want me to.
I like that.
It's still a kind of difficult thing to say.
It's so hard.
And
that's why I avoid it.
But that's also a cautionary tale. I feel like so often we jump very quickly into these things. And then it's like, oh, how do I get out of this? Oh, I got to have an awkward conversation. Oh, it's like, well, you wouldn't if you just didn't jump in feet first, like at minute 2.
Well, that brings me back to literally the beginning, which is that like I call everybody my friend. And I think it's so important. And that is one of the things I loved about the book. It's this taking inventory. Are they really your friend? Are they your close friend? Or is this an acquaintance? Like, and then you don't have, and then know that.
Stop. Exactly. Because you're digging yourself into a hole that if you don't get out of, you're burning the candle at both ends. It's a problem.
It's a huge problem. So something people don't know is that I have a story in your book. I contributed something to this book. I saved it for this moment because people don't know. I thought it might be cute if I just read it real quick.
Please do. I love this story.
It pertains to this exact moment. But all right. I've known Faye for as long as I can remember. She's the daughter of my mother's good friend. She's the same age as my older sister. So she was friends with my sister before she was my friend. But Faye is a sweetheart. She didn't talk down to me, and I felt like she was my friend too. In the 10th grade, I attended an all-girls Jewish day school in Brooklyn, New York, away from home and boarding in another family's home. And I wasn't happy, so I started acting out. I didn't do well in a number of classes, and 2 months into the school year, I was expelled. Private schools do not accept new students mid-semester, and I was not a great student at the time, so who would want me? I felt sad, humiliated, and angry. At that time, Faye had become a director of a small private K-8 school in Palo Alto, California. My mom called Faye and told her what happened. Without skipping a beat, Faye said, I could use an assistant in our preschool. Adele can come here. I don't know if she actually did or whether she was just wanting to help, but it didn't matter. In the blink of an eye, I went from Brooklyn to sunny California. The job as a preschool assistant was a dream job for a young high schooler like me. The kids I taught adored me. The parents and community accepted me lovingly. I went from feeling like an outcast to feeling valued and appreciated because of Faye. She kept an eye on me, and of course we became close. I truly believe Faye rescued me from a very different destiny. She was a good friend to my mom, to my older sister, and especially to me, on how friendships could change your life. So just a fun little tidbit for everybody listening, and for you, that's my producer's sister.
Oh.
So I thought it would be sweet to read that.
That is so cute. Yeah, and there are 10 vignettes, just standalone stories. I love that story.
And the ones you chose are really good, and they're beautiful. So thank you so much for doing this with me today. I love the book. I can't recommend it enough, guys. It's a fast read. It's an easy read. It's filled with just quick, punchy, great information. Like, it's really an easy read. And it's even if you think you're an expert at level 10 friendship, there's really something for everyone to learn.
I agree.
Thank you so much, Erin.
Thank you so much.